welcome to Rob's Fix-It Shop. I got something kind of interesting in here. My cousin's husband gave this to me, and his father had fixed it up years ago. It's a record player. It's an AirKing. Never heard of it before. Yeah, so he gave it to me. He didn't have any use for it, but it looks like his dad did a nice job kind of refinishing it. So I'm just going to plug it in, see if I can get it working, see if it works. It probably does. Yeah, just take a look at it. So it looks really nice. It's on, off, and tune. It's still got the decal on it, volume. The felt on the platter's still nice. Looks like we got a cartridge in there. It's quite the interesting needle on there. But I think there might be something messed up with the spring because this is like super heavy. So here's the inside. 3 tubes and speaker, a motor there. Nothing too fancy. Looks like it's got a little connector for the plug. Oh yeah, AirKing model 4625. Okay, so here are some surprises. The speaker looks kind of torn up in there, and it's got an electrical cord going to it. And the electrical cord also is connected to this little transformer here. So we're going to have to be careful. I'm going to cut these right away. Okay, so the speaker clearly needs some work. It's all torn up in there. I'll have to fix that. But the grill looks nice. It's almost like a piece of metal screen with some kind of flocking on it or something. Yeah, and then the transformer looks like it fits on here. Yeah, on here. And had fallen off at some point. So, or actually I think they took it off because they had other wires kind of soldered to here, which is kind of weird to me. Anyway, so then this here looks pretty sketchy. I'll have to do something to kind of hold those in place. So here's the big reveal underneath. Boy, it doesn't get much simpler than this. This almost looks like a big resistor here. It's a series set. Looks like somebody's been in here kind of messing with some of it. Well, how about that? I found a schematic. It's kind of interesting that they just have the power line. Its power line comes right in and runs this whole thing. There's no transformer, but then the filaments go through this resistor right here. Looks like 135 ohms, 5 watts, and that must moderate the well, this is a 35, a 50, so that's 85 volts, 90 and 100 volts. So that must be just to bring it down the last 100 volts. I mean the last 10 volts. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is, you see the power cord comes in and comes into the switch here. This is should be the ground side of or the common side of the plug. So it comes in a switch, and then the switch switches it to ground here, right? And I don't want that. I want the power cord to come in, ground to the chassis, and then the power then comes up to the switch and then back to here. And so we're switching the hot side on and off. This is a non-polarized plug, so we could be either the hot side or the common side could be right to this chassis. So we're going to switch this out. That's the first thing we're going to do. And then they're also using the post on the switch here as a connection to ground to this capacitor. So we're just going to cut this. Okay, got my little grommet in after a terrible fight, like always happens. Okay, so there's our power cord. We come in, we ground the common wire, and we go through the switch here. We still got to take care of this, but otherwise I think we're looking good there. Okay, so this speaker is pretty beat up here. You know what, I think I'm just going to leave it right in there. So I'm trying to make sure that these wires they're kind of fragile, so I think I'm just going to take a piece of paper here, which is going to look kind of natural. And it's wax underneath, it's waxy, so I'm not sure what it will stick to it. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try just putting some silicone on here, which will kind of hold everything in place, and then put the paper over it. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to let that sit. So then on the speaker I just took some coffee filter and some rubber cement and put it on there, and that worked pretty good. Let me just check what kind of a speaker this is. So 2.9 ohms, so probably a 4 ohm speaker. Let's see if it works. Yeah, so that sounds pretty good, considering. So I'm going to yank these capacitors out. These are really leaky, although these don't really matter that much. In this one, filter cap, I'll pull that out. And so I'll be back. Yeah, so that doesn't look in great shape. Let's test the other side. What? Okay, that's reading 25 picofarads. It's probably not right. What do we got? Oh well. Alright, so I just rewired this part of the circuit here. There's a 0.05 microfarad cap here, and then this 0.001 here, which seems kind of small. I don't know, but I don't know much about that phonograph head, but I just left it as it was. And okay, let's see what we've got here. So I used some shielded cable here, and just put the resistor up here closer to the pot, and then again I have shielded cable coming down to the capacitor that comes into the amp there. And then here's the capacitor between ground and the other side of the phono pickup. So I'm not sure. That's a little bit flimmy-flammy, but it'll do. And then over here, I just clean this wire up, come like this. This is really stiff here, so I'm not too worried about it. And then I put a capacitor here to ground that comes around that other side. This used to use the terminal strip on the top here, this one right here, as a connection point, but that made no sense to me going out there and then coming back in, when you can just go straight over. And this is just a tone control. I think it's just shorting some of your frequencies through this capacitor here using this knob, because it's just going to ground. So it's just how much this capacitor shorts to ground and what frequencies it shorts to ground. So I think we're looking really good here. And I think it's ready to start up. Let's go take a look at the speaker. So there's the speaker. I used a coffee filter and some rubber cement, and then I did a little bit on the back too to kind of close up those gaps. And it feels pretty good, and it sounds pretty good. So then here's our transformer. I kind of put silicone in there to kind of hold those wires a little bit better, and you know, I have these leads coming out. I'll cut these way back because they'll just go to the speaker, and then maybe I'll varnish this a little bit to kind of make it look better. But I just wanted something to kind of give it that old-timey look without letting that silicone show so much. Anyway, so now I just need to attach this to the speaker and we're good. And if you look, here's where that goes right here. It must have fallen off at some point, and we'll put that back together. Alright, there it is. And I got my wires soldered here. Okay, so I've got my Variac here and a dim bulb tester. I've got it turned on. Okay, so we're at about 50 volts. Let's see. Check first the power coming in. 50 volts, good. And then let's check there's nothing coming out of the diode yet. Turn up a little more. The dim bulb's not going. Our tube's lighting up. They're in a series, so if one's dead, they're all dead. Yep, they're lighting up. So here I'm just pushing my phone into the amp. Sounds not too bad. Tone works, volume works. Okay, so here's the bad news. This is an Astatic cartridge. It's completely dead. I have it hooked up. I don't have shielded cables on it, so it's going to be noisy, but there's nothing coming out of it. So I got myself some of these piezo cartridges, and I'm going to see if I can rebuild this. I've seen it done. Watch the videos, so I'm going to try to rebuild it, but I've got a couple more things that need to show up in the mail before I can do it. But I think that should be pretty interesting. There's kind of a gap underneath here, so I just put a little piece of wood to kind of space it out, and then I'm using an almost brand new drill bit. That's one. That came out pretty easy. Okay, so that's one. That came out pretty easy. Now let's do the other one. There's three altogether. Okay, that's the next. it's got a thing there, so I'm just going to put that over a hole. Here's our last one. Okay, I'm going to take that drill bit out too because I think I might use it to help get the rivet out. Alright, let's see if we can get this thing open. See if I can push the rivets out. Alright, so let's open it up and see what we've got. Well, that's a mess. So that whole crystal there is falling apart. But this looks in good condition. That looks in good condition. And we've got a little bit of crud in here. Okay, so I'm just gonna clean that out as best I can. Yeah, some anhydrous alcohol is working pretty good to kind of clean these out. But I'm just kind of scraping out all the, there's some rubber, dried up old hard rubber in here. And then here we got to get all this stuff out of here and get this rubber off. So I'm just going to carefully, I don't want to bust this, that's for sure. Alright, that looks in pretty good condition. Get that old dried up hard rubber off there. Okay, so we're going to have this in here. This is going to come like this. So we need to cut these edges off. A little more. Now let's just make sure it's working. It's still working. Looks like it's still working. Alright, so I finished measuring everything. If I measure how deep these are, it's about 2.4 millimeters. The thickness of that's about 0.4. And so I need to find something that kind of fits in that range. So I'm going to scrounge around, see if I can find stuff. Okay, so so I've got these two pieces like this, right? And I want to fit that disc in here, and I got to fit something in here and something in here. So it's about 2.19 millimeters of an opening and about 0.2 millimeters for that disc. And this, you know, like whenever you repair a phone, you get these tools for opening, and that's about 1.13. That's really close. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can cut this and then get it down a little bit. See if that'll work. Alright, so that's about the right thickness. So now I'm going to heat it up. See if I can fold it in two. I think that'll work. So I think that's going to do. Okay, so I'm just going to glue this into here with a little epoxy. See if that holds it. Alright, we'll just let that harden up, and then we'll be back. If we look here, there was kind of a rubber kind of bushing around right here and right here, and we want to recreate that here and here and here and here. And so I watched somebody else's video, and they were using this stuff, insulation putty. And so what I found is that if you take some of this and cut it really thin, and I found scissors works best for me, but whatever. Okay, and it's just kind of a sticky rubber, right? It kind of stretches. So I think that's about the right thickness there. And so trim it down, and let's see, the bottom. I'm just going to try to stick it a little bit right there. Stick it a little bit right there. So I'll just try to put it right about there, and right about there. Push it into place. trim it. Okay, so once we've got it kind of into place like that, then we'll put the top on, squeeze it together, keeping the force right here. And we'll trim off that excess that kind of got squeezed out. Alright, so I think that's going to be pretty good. It's taken me a number of tries to get it. Got that lined up there and lined up here. And you can see there's a little tiny gap in there that's going to hold on to the membrane or to the piezo. And so next I got to figure out how to take that piezo and you know, I got to slide it in there like that, but then how to kind of hold that up, but hold it rigid too. I don't want to move it around, and I don't want it dampered. I want this to flex the plate. Okay, so what I found is I needed something that was about 2¼ millimeters. And I found out that this piece of glass is exactly what I need. So I'm going to put that right here. And I just kind of tested gluing it with epoxy, and it really holds well. So I think I'm going to glue this in with epoxy and then put this in like this and glue that all together, and then at some point then I'll put a piece of rubber on the top, but this whole thing will be fixed in like that, and then that should give me the most deflection for my money here. So I was just kind of trying to figure out what works best with this thing, and so I just have a wire coming out the bottom, and I have sound coming through a speaker. Then I have the piezo sensor in there, and I'm just kind of experimenting with bringing it in and out. And it really seems like it works best with it right underneath kind of the edge there. And you can see there's the pickup there, and it seems to work best with it kind of on the edge there, and then kind of a rigid and with a rigid, like just a piece of glass underneath it right there. So I think I'm going to glue that in. I'm going to glue this in and see how it works. I experimented with a little piece of rubber and other things like that, but it really seems to work best with the rigid thing. So I think that's what I'm going to try. Okay, so that's in there pretty good. So I'm just gonna, I got some super glue. I'm gonna super glue this here, and then here's the back piece with still a little bit of the crystal on it. I'm gonna have to figure out how to get that soldered in there and these wires soldered in. So, but that shouldn't be too hard. Okay, so I'm just gonna put a little super glue on here. A spacer on the top. Alright, there it is together. And I got a set of 2mm screws, and see how they work. Alright, so let's see if I can get these tiny screws even in. There, I think that looks pretty good. curious whether it works. So there's the motor, nice little propeller on it. Spins pretty freely. I oiled it a little bit. There, see, that's the pin. I'm going to pull that out and pull that shaft out because I think you have to grease the shaft. I don't know, I'll see once I get it out. So that then took this wheel out right there. But that's just a bronze bushing, so I'm going to clean that up and I'll put that back and I'll figure out how to get this out because this has to spin freely here. Well, after having the clip, not being able to get the clip off and having it spring out and me searching around on the floor for it about 12 times, I decided just to take the whole mechanism out, which is what I should have done in the first place because it's super easy to get out. So here it is. So here's the spindle mechanism. It's supposed to come out from the bottom like that, but the grease in here was pretty gross and hard, and it just held in by this pin here. So I'm going to grease that up and put it back together, and I oiled up the motor in here, and so I think we're looking pretty good. And we just had a lightning storm come through, and so Georgia came down to join me down in the shop, seeking my protection from the storm. Right, girl? Yeah, that sounds pretty good. I think that sounds really good. Well, what do you know? It works. It doesn't sound too bad. It looks like we're just about a 1 volt peak to peak, and I'm skipping the volume control completely, and I don't have much volume here. So I'm going to look at, so this last tube is a 12 volt, has 12 volts going across the heater. And so I'm going to see if I can make an amplifier that I can grab the voltage between this and ground and see if I can make a little preamp. Because I think it should be able to go about 3 times as loud as this, but we'll see. Okay, so the cartridge seems to be working pretty good, but it only puts out, it's less than a volt peak to peak, and so the phonograph is really quiet. And so I thought, oh, here's what I'll do is I'll build a preamp for it. And one of the things about this circuit is that you have your heaters for the tubes. So you have 120 volts, and then you have the heaters for the tubes, and then that goes to ground like that, right? And you get a voltage drop. I think one of them's 25 volt drop, and then a 50 volt drop, and then a 12 volt drop, right? And then there's a resistor that takes up the rest right here. And here, we'll go look at that. So your power is coming in right here, going through this resistor, through this tube, which is a 35, so it drops 35 volts there, comes into the next tube through here, drops 50 volts, and then comes over here, and then drops 12 volts. Oh, let me take this out of here, right? So, and then this one then connects to ground. And so, what I'm thinking is that I can also power my preamp off right here, right? Because I don't have a transformer in there of any sort. So, but I do have 12 volts here, but it's 12 volts AC, right? Because we're dropping 12 volts across here. So I thought, well, I'll put in a diode, right, and a filter cap, right, and then that gets me about 15 volts DC, right? So I thought, okay, well, I'll put that into my preamp, right? And so then for the preamp, I took an op amp, and let's see, what does it look like? So here's the circuit diagram I used. I have just a voltage splitter here because I just have one supply side, and so I just use this kind of circuit here, and as a preamp, right? But when I hooked my power supply to it, so let's, you know, take this power supply then and run it to my, I just kind of draw my preamp like this, right? When I did that, you still had, you know, too much ripple on here, so I did end up putting a 9-volt regulated supply, 7809 supply here, and then I power my op amp off that, and I think that's going to work pretty good. So here it is. So here's my diode acting as my rectifier. Filter cap here comes into a 9-volt voltage regulator, and then here's the op amp. I'm just using one side of it, and then instead of using you know, 2 resistors for the feedback and that kind of voltage divider, I used a potentiometer, because that gives me the ability to kind of adjust the voltage, and so let's turn this on. So you can hear the motor spinning. Right, and then if I come over at my scope, there I've got my signal coming in, and I've got it adjusted so that it's about 3 times the signal coming in as the signal going out, and it looks like it's going pretty good. I don't know what that bouncing is from. I can't seem to get rid of that. Yeah, so I still have that little bit of bouncy there. I'm not sure what that is. If anybody knows, let me know. I'll try to figure it out. But now I'm going to try putting the preamp in and see what kind of an effect it has in the circuit, in the real circuit. Okay, so here it is in place, and I just put an RCA jack in for instead of what it did have is this guy here. Now, one thing, I'm grounded directly to the chassis here, so you know, you can't do this without getting a polarized plug. So something to keep in mind. But yeah, so I have the signal coming in through here, and then coming out through here and amplified back through here. And so let's see how this thing works. And I guess we don't really need this coupling cap anymore, so maybe I'll take that out. I think that's kind of redundant, because we have this cap right here that does the same thing. So I'll just run it like this, and then maybe I'll take that out. Well, let's try it out. Alright, so we switch it on. Hopefully it won't smoke. Get our motor going. Turn the volume down. Okay. Let's see if we can turn it up. So that works pretty good. I can turn it up to the right volume. So I think I'm going to experiment a little bit and get it right. So here's the rebuilt phono cartridge, and I just have it going into some speakers I've got from a modern stereo, and it just sounds a little funny on the bass end. But it doesn't sound too bad in the mids. So that's a wrap on our AirKing phonograph, and it was a pretty fun project, a very simple amplifier. It looked like they used tubes that were normally in a radio, All-American 5 radio, and probably because there was a lot of them around. That part's very simple. The rebuilding the phono cartridge, that was something I'd never done before, but it seemed to go pretty well, and if I put the phonograph head right into a modern stereo, it doesn't sound too bad. I don't know how good these records are. I just borrowed them from a friend because I didn't have any. But like I say, it was kind of a fun project, and I'm glad you came along for the ride. And if you liked the video, please hit like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.